Good evening. I would like to begin this evening with an acknowledgement and to underscore the unbelievable work of Torah Anytime in providing so much Divrei Torah worldwide to an audience of thirsty listeners, listening to over 450 different shiurim, rabbanim, speakers, those who are invited to participate. And the Rabbanu Shalom should always give them tremendous hatzlacha because they're doing it l'shem shamayim, and it is a beautiful Kiddush Hashem. Secondly, in the 3 years that I've been doing this each and every week, I've never thanked the listeners. We have almost 1,000 listeners between Torah Anytime, YouTube, Kol Haloshon, and the Friday shir that the women have. We have 200 here, 300 there, so it's almost 1,000. And I want to just thank and acknowledge my appreciation to each and every one of you who, I guess, feel that it's worthy of the time. And I thank you for listening, and we hope all together my saying and your listening provides a very warm Kiddush Hashem and a nachas ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This week's parsha is Parsha Shoftim, and one of the psukim in Parsha Shoftim is Tamim Tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha, and that the pasuk means simply, as Rashi says, that you should go with HaKadosh Baruch Hu with tamimus, with simplicity. And it's referring really, as the Ramban says, this pasuk he holds as one of the 613 mitzvahs aseh d'oraisa. The Rambam disagrees with him, and he doesn't hold that it's a separate mitzvah, but it's an inyan that the Torah is telling you how to live, that you should be. Don't look for asidus. This means that if somebody wants to know what's going to be, and they go to an astrologer, so that is an Isser D'Oraisa according to the Rambam and the Rabban. Excuse me. Because you're seeking to know what under natural causes is not provided. You're trying to jump the gun. You're trying to find out what will be and what won't be. And there is a very important distinction between the Rambam and the Ramban, because the Rambam learns out this inyan of not seeking out futuristic happenings by sources other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Rambam learns that we learn it from the pasuk Lo Sa'onenu in Parshas Kedoshim, but the Ramban learns it from here, this pasuk of Tamim Tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. And the difference between the Rambam and the Ramban, because the Machaber and Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rambam, and the Ramah, who we Ashkenazim follow the opinion of the Ramah, so they each paskin differently in this inyan, in this category. The Rambam holds that to go to an astrologer, to send somebody else to an astrologer, or even if you heard third party, that means you didn't send anyone, and you didn't ask yourself, but you're standing in the street talking with someone, and suddenly somebody calls out from across the street, I was just by the astrologer, and the astrologer said that this Wednesday, don't be on this block, there's going to be trouble. So the Rambam holds that even though you didn't ask, and you didn't send someone, but you were just standing there talking and you heard across the street someone shouting this to somebody else, you have to ignore it. But the Ramban holds tzorech lemechash. You have to take heed, and you're not allowed to go yourself, and you're not allowed to send. But if somebody shouted out across the street, you should take heed from what you heard, because you didn't send, so it's not an Aveira. And we paskin like that, like the Ramah paskins like that, like the Ramban, and you have to take heed. You can't just ignore it. Now, the Medrash on this brings a story with Shlomo HaMelech, that somebody came to, we know that Shlomo HaMelech was the wisest of all men, and one of the things that he was aware of and knew, which the common average person, of course, did not know, was sichas ophos, that the bird, the language of the birds, he knew very well. And there was a Yid, the Medrash says, came to him and begged him to teach him the language of the birds. And Shlomo HaMelech tried to get out of it. And the man came a few times to him, and finally he was nudging him so much that he taught him the language of the birds. 2 weeks later, says the Medrash, this man who just now learned the language of the birds was walking down the street, and he hears two birds talking in the tree. And one bird says to the other, you see this man walking down the street? His whole flock of cattle are going to die in 2 weeks. And the man heard this, so he ran home and he found a buyer for his whole flock. And the person who bought the flock, 2 weeks later, every single animal, every cow died, just like was predicted by the birds. So the Medrash continues and says that, and he had sold, he went home and he sold his whole flock, so he had the gain. And then sometime later, again walking down the street, this man hears that his house and all his possession are going to burn. There's going to be a fire and he's going to lose everything. So he found a buyer for the house, and indeed, shortly thereafter, the house burnt down. So, and he was very happy that now he knew the language of the birds. Look what it saved him, all of his flock and his whole house and everything else. So the Medrash says that a week later, he's walking down the street and he hears a bird say, oh, you see that man coming? In 10 days, he's going to die. So the Medrash says that this man ran back to Shlomo HaMelech and said, I heard from the birds that I'm going to end up dying. So Shlomo HaMelech said to him, I want you to understand something. You pestered me to a point that I taught you the language of the birds. So you understood that your flock was going to die. And you understood that there was going to be a fire. But you have a package of averos, of sins, hanging over you. And in Shemayim, rather than killing you, they were going to just take away your flock. But because you wanted to know the language of the bird, so you knew what was going to happen, and you thought you were outsmarting the situation. And then they came back and you heard that your house is going to burn. And this was to free you from all of those averas that you had hanging over you. But you were outsmarting Shemayim. So there was nothing left because the averas had to be addressed. And that's why you were given the death penalty. And indeed, the man died 10 days later. So what do we, and the Medrash says this on Tamim Tiyeh Im Hashem Elokecha, that this guy wanted to know what's going to be. Well, that's not the derech ha'olam. That's not the natural way of this world that we know. We're not Nevi'im or with Baskol that we can see into the future. Tzaddikim used to be able to close their eyes and know what's going to be and what's going to happen. And as Shlomo Melech said, you wouldn't have died if you would have just taken away they would have taken away your flock or burnt your house down, at least you'd be alive. So the point is that when we have tragedy, and it's easier said than done, but when tragedy comes one way, someone's way, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, we have to have emunah that this is the best thing for us that's happening. It's not good. It could be a terrible tragedy. But you don't know the cheshbon in heaven, and you don't know what's waiting for you in the hallway if this doesn't happen this way. So we have to have emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He knows what's best and He sends what's needed or what's important at that moment. And that has to carry us through our daily lives and the week and the month and the year. Now, we're coming into Elul. Today was, I'm saying the shir Wednesday night, and we just had 2 days of Rosh Chodesh. And Parshas Shoftim almost every year is the first Shabbos of Chodesh Elul. Now Tzaddikim said, Shoftim v'shoitrim, judges and police, titen lecha b'chol shi'arecha, that you should appoint in your cities. And Kadmonim said it's a remez to Chodesh Elul, because a sha'ar is a gate, and shi'arecha is a reference, according to this drash, is a message to our ears, to us, concerning our ears, our eyes, and our mouth. Because in our mouth we can speak, we can express, we can say divrei Torah, we say brachas, we daven, it's beautiful. But on the other hand, we can use our mouth for something not so proper. We can eat things that we don't even know it's not kosher, or there's bugs in it, or that we don't know what's going on. So say the Kadmonim that when the pasuk says you should put police over your sha'arecha, that means that a person should be the policeman for what comes in and out of his mouth. And likewise, we have eyelids to be able to protect our eyes from what we should not be looking at and we should not see. And our ears, we have earlobes to be able to close our ears so we shouldn't hear the nonsense and the shtusarai that so many have in their daily schedules come. And that's the remez. Shoftim v'shoitrim titen lecha b'chol shi'arecha. The sha'arim, the gateways of the ears, the mouth, and the eyes, should put some special noted protection that when we come into Elul, and that's why Shoftim is the first Sedra, usually of Elul. Because what is Elul? We have to give ourselves a very strong push in the right direction to make a difference in this year. And as I mentioned to you a week or two ago, that Elul is the gateway, is the threshold for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the beautiful days between Yom Kippur and Sukkot, and the Simcha of Sukkot. And we need Hachana. No one has a tasty, delicious Seudah Shabbos without someone Erev Shabbos baking those challahs, cooking the gefilte fish, preparing the salmon or the white fish, and doing what has to be done, l'koved Shabbos. It doesn't just fly together. So Elul is the hachana for the year. And we have to set our mindset to be able to drive down that path. Now the Sedra opens, Shoftim v'shoitrim titan l'cho b'chol she'arecha, and then the next pasuk says, Lo sikach shoichad, that you should not take a bribe, an admonition to the judges. Don't take a bribe. And then the pasuk says, Ki ha-shoichad ya'aver einei chachomim v'salev divrei tzadikim. So there are meforshim who ask that why does it open in a singular? Lo sikach shochad is speaking to an individual. And then the pasuk ends up later saying, Ki ha-shochad ya'aver einei chachomim, plural, v'salev divrei tzadikim, again plural. So it begins with the singular and it goes into the plural. So it's brought that the Talmud, and it doesn't say his name, of Reb Chaim Vital, who was the star Talmud of the Arizal, asked this question. Why singular and then why the plural? It should be either both singular or both plural. But you can't start with singular and then just talk to Klal Yisrael in the plural. So he said, because when a person gives a bribe to a judge, you may think that so one judge took the bribe, but there's still always two other judges, and there's sometimes four other judges. We have a bezdin of 5, or you have a bezdin of Chav Gimel. So that even if this one judge, and let's say there's only 3 judges at the Din Torah. So if this one judge takes the bribe, what's it got to do with the other 2 that remain? They're going to paskin erlach and fine. But says this Talmud of Reb Chaim Vital that the power of a judge taking a bribe is so immense and intense that the person who took the bribe is going to want to show the person that he took the money from that he can produce and be successful. So it's not only he that was affected, he's going to go out of his way with like a super push to influence the other 2 that they should see his point of view of why this person should succeed. So that's why he says that it goes on the individual, but then it goes in because it's not only the individual, and you may think so, but it doesn't happen like that, that he will go out of his way to influence the others, and that's why it will be so crooked. And that really is a lesson for each and every one of us. Because when we do something wrong, it was part of a group, especially kids, that's why they're influenced by the peers so much. They could be 5 of them and one of them is sitting there, oh, did you hear what happened with so-and-so? And they're then listening, all 4 are listening to the Lashon Hara of the day. Or one could say, I heard there's a terrific movie, let's go to the movies now. Not everyone in the group would be so happy about it and would not want to go then to the movies. But the one who's like the leader of the group or the biggest talker of the group is going to sway the thinking of the others, and the group very likely will end up at the movies. So the message isn't just for judges, but it's a message to all leaders in how, and a leader could be with just 2 friends. Because if one is a little more assertive and aggressive, then it can take down the other one or many with how strong he is in his power of persuasion. Now, speaking of Reb Chaim Vital, you all know that Reb Chaim Vital was the star Talmud of the Arizal. And the Arizal says, interestingly, that there is a pasuk in our Sedra that says, Ki pole dovar bein dam ledam, bein din ledin, uvein nega lo nega, divrei rivos bisharecha, v'kamta v'yolisa el hamakom asher yivchar Hashem. So, says the Arizal. First, what is the simple meaning of this pasuk? The simple meaning is ki pole, that in a city where you have rabbonim or a bezdin, and a shaila comes up that you don't know how to paskin. Yipole means like a lashon of pella, wonder, like you don't know the answer. So the pasuk says that you go to Yerushalayim, and there you have a larger bezdin, or you have who to ask, and that's where you get your shaila answered. That's the simple meaning of the pasuk. But the Arizal said that the pasuk says whether it's a shaila bein dam ledam, something to do with blood, and the Medrash says on this pasuk that the Malachei Hashares, the angels in heaven, came before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they said to him that your pasuk bein dam ledam, talking about blood, we know that there is a halacha of kisui hadam, that if someone shechts a chicken, when the blood comes out after the shechita, there's a mitzvah aseh d'oraisa of kisui hadam, that the blood that's coming out has to be put into the ground. Not every drop of it, but there has to be some of it put in, and we cover v'chisahu be'ofar, and we cover it with dust, with dirt. Why? What's that halacha all about? Because it says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Gemara says, has rachmanis on even the blood. He's sensitive to the blood of a chicken. A chicken was just killed. And to leave the blood outside on the floor, it's lacking in sensitivity to the chicken. So we cover as a mark and a signal of wanting to acknowledge that the chicken was a creation also. So we cover its blood, not to just leave it hefker on the middle of the floor, the middle of the street. And we must cover some of that blood in honor of that sensitivity. So the Malachi Ashuri said to God, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that you were so careful by the Churban Beis HaMikdash. They said, you were so careful and sensitive to even a chicken and its blood. And look at the rivers of blood of Klal Yisrael that's flowing by the Churban Beis HaMikdash. And that's what they asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they went on. Because this pasuk in our Sedra says, Bein dam ledam, and then it says, Uvein din ledin, that they didn't know how to paskin. So the Medrash says that that was a reference to the fact that there is a halacha, oso ve'es beno lo sishchatu biyom echad. That means the Torah has rachmanis, that you shouldn't take a mother and a child, and even though their whole existence was to be shechted and to have a bracha made on it and eat it l'shem shamayim, but don't do the mother and the child in one day. It's not sensitive to a family. So the Malachi Ashuris then said that you had said in the Torah to protect the feelings of a mother and a son, not to shech them both on the same day. And look what was doing by the Churban in Yerushalayim, that mothers and sons and children and everyone were being killed left and right, all in one day. That was the second question of the angels, the Malachim. And then the third question that they asked, it says in our pasuk, Bein dam ledam, Bein din ledin, uvein nega lo nega. That when we have the halachas of nega tzaras, so the way we deal with the house is at the end, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, the Gemara is chas al maman Yisrael, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want to waste the money. So if in the beginning we can find out if this nega is tameh or Torah, we do all of that. As a last resort, we knock down the house. We take away the money from the person. And so the Malachim said, so you went and handled the Negoyim with a sensitivity for the Mammon Yisrael. And what about building a Bais HaMikdash and all of the Kalim? How much gold and silver and money the Yidden had to spend for it. And you went and did the Churban and wiped out all of it, and all of that costly expense for the vessels and for the Kalim of the Bais HaMikdash. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu heard, the Medrash says, all three questions, and he said, I'll give you the simple answer. Because the pasuk says, Divrei Rivos Bisharecha, because of the machloikis that was taking place in Yerushalayim. There was so much strife between the Jews, so much jealousy, so much avlas, so many avlas that were perpetrated one to another. And that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, that when there's no shalom in a community, so you should know that you're going to pay with everything, because that is the cementing factor of a community and its survival and its thriving, in a good sense, is the level of the shalom and no machloikas. And that's reason that the very last line of our benching is Hashem Yevarech Esamo Vashalom. And the very last bracha of Shemona Esrei is Hamavarech Esamo Yisrael Bashalom. So this concept of having shalom, HaKadosh Baruch Hu answered, and that's why the pasuk concludes, V'kamta v'alisa el hamakom, because Yerushalayim was Yerush Shalem, that there was shlemus by the shalom in Yerushalayim, and that's what they had to strive for, and because they didn't, you had your Churban Habayis, and that's why you had mothers and children killed in one day. That's why you had the blood of so many flowing rivers of blood in the street, and that's why by the Negoim, you asked that there was such sensitivity. That's why there was no sensitivity, because of this problem. What do we take away from this beautiful Chazal? We take away that there's so much pettiness that we could avoid if we just stopped to think for a moment. 50%, 80% of strife in a household between a husband and a wife. Something comes up, well, let's do this, let's have that for dinner, and there's a difference of opinion. A person just has to rise an inch above the occasion and say, okay, you want to have this for dinner? I really preferred that, but no problem. Let's enjoy dinner together. Or I don't want to go to my in-laws this Shabbos, and the wife feels she misses the parents, she'd like to spend the Shabbos. We have to just stand up and move off of our stubbornness and the position we take in so many of the issues that come out, that we would have a smoother ride, a much more pleasant atmosphere, and we would be able to deal with daily life above and beyond. Now, we know that in this Sedra there is a section that discusses the Kohen Mashuach Milchama, that there was a Kohen which was appointed, and his whole job, he had to do something with the Chatzotzros before they were sounded, before they went out to Milchama. But his main job was to get in, this is in our Parsha, was to get up in front of Klal Yisrael when they had to wage war and said, don't be afraid and don't be worrisome. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to deliver us victory. In other words, his job was to be like the chaplain before war, getting up and being very, very specific. And he was the second most distinguished Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash, because the first was the Kohen Gadol, but then there was a Sagan Kohen Gadol, the vice president, so to speak, the second in command. But the Kohen Mashuach Milchama stood higher on the totem pole in terms of dignified distinction than even the Sagan Kohen Gadol, because only two people, for instance, had to marry a girl who was never married. That means a regular Kohen is not allowed to marry a divorcee. But if he wants to marry an almana, a widow, he's allowed to. But the Kohen Gadol and the Kohen Mashuach Milchama they were both not allowed to marry neither a widow or a divorcee. The Sagan Kohen Gadol was allowed to marry an almana. So the point being that there was like very great distinction. The Kohen Gadol and the Kohen Mashuach Milchama were allowed to talk to and ask the Urim V'Tumim. They had to find out, should they be going to war? What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? But the Sagan Kohen Gadol was never allowed to talk to the Urim V'Tumim, but the Kohen Mashuach Milchama was allowed to. Now, and there are other cases, but in one respect, the Kohen Mashuach Milchama superseded even the Kohen Gadol. And that was, the halacha is that if a Kohen Gadol died, or a Rav of a shul, or a Rosh Yeshiva of a yeshiva, or a Chazan in a shul, and any one of them have a child, a son, that's roy for the position. That means he doesn't be, maybe his father was super great, he doesn't have to be as great. But as long as he falls in to the criterion of your Shamayim and the qualities are there that he could execute the job that his father had, he has kedima to the job. And that is the halacha. It's called sroros. Now, but the Kohen Mashuach Milchama does not have, the Kohen Gadol has that halacha, but not the Kohen Mashuach Milchama. If he passed away, his son did not get automatically the job. And that's halacha. The Rambam goes into great detail about this Kohen Mashuach Milchama. And there's a story with the Chavetz Chaim that a community came to him because their Rav passed away, and there was a machloikis in the city whether the Rav who passed away, whether his son should get the job or not. So some said, look, that's the halacha. He's an er l'chayid and he's fine, and so he should get it. And the other group said, he's not tough enough. And we want to give it to this other person who's also a big Talmud Chacham, but he can fight the trends. You have to realize in the time of the Chavetz Chaim, you had all of these isms, the fascism and the communism and the socialism and the Marxism. You had all these things. So the trend wasn't just who was a bigger Talmud Chacham, and they came to the Chavetz Chaim, the two groups, for present each side of what their feelings were, and wait for the Chavetz Chaim to paskin. And at the end of the discussion, the Chavetz Chaim said that you may take the other one and not the son of the Rav. So the people said, the Chavetz Chaim himself answered, you're going to ask me, the halacha is that he should really be appointed, but our times are not the times that once were. And if you don't have someone, despite that both of these candidates have beautiful qualities, beautiful midos, beautiful families, Talmidei Chachomim, but in this day and age, Yiddishkeit of Shulchan Aruch requires the combative backbone to fight and stand up and fight for what the Torah requires and what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. and they took the outsider, not the son. This was the reason, says the Rambam, that the Kohen Mashuach Milchama did not, he was the only one in that whole hierarchy that the son did not take over. Because you needed someone to get up in front of Klal Yisrael before they went to war and say that you should not be afraid, you should not this. And he was like the backbone to instill and to impart to the very fiber of each and every Yid going out to war that they should have a posture of goodness and strength. And he had to emanate it. So you have to be someone to be an effective leader, to be able to have the power of instilling that. And that's the reason that his son did not, because the Iker was not giving it over. It was to do effectively his job of strengthening the morale of the troops, the warriors, not warriors, W-O-R-R, but W-A-R-R, warriors, meaning the people fighting the milchama. Now, at the end of our Sedra, under this topic of war, this Kohen Mashuach Milchama got up and said, anybody who just got married, go back home, because you're going to be worried that if you get killed in war, you just married a new wife, somebody else is going to come and marry her. Or if you just built a new house and you didn't move in yet, you were supposed to move in a month from now. And maybe you're worried that someone else is going to come in and inaugurate your new house. Or if you planted a vineyard, this is the three items that, or if you're just scared out of your wits. So the Meforshim are curious. I mean, the Torah doesn't tell us if someone doesn't like the concept of tefillin, so don't do it. I mean, here there was a mitzvah, this was Milchemes mitzvah, that they went out to with the Urim V'Tumim. So why should they be exempted because they built a new house? This is Milchemes mitzvah. So the Meforshim explained that's why the Kohen Mashuach Milchama didn't want that when you are part of a tzibur and you're worried, you're going to get 100 guys shaking. You're going to be so terrorized and so worried and so scared that you're going to pull down the whole morale. And that's why every person has an achrayus to the klal, to his family, that you have to be constantly with the backbone to rise above the occasion of tragedy, of disappointment, of loss of money, whatever comes your way, to be able to rise above and beyond, to carry out the mission of leadership that is required of every father and every husband. Leadership doesn't mean that you have to be the president of a shul with 2,000 talesim, but you're the leader in your house. You're the leader in your shul, the rov. You're the leader in a community. And you have to be able to muster the courage and the commitment to be able to bring out the best of a given situation, both good and both bad. Now, I'm running out of time, and I wanted to share with you that something that on the pasuk tzedek tzedek tirdof, that you run after justice. And Rashi says on that pasuk that you have to go after appointing honest judges. That means leadership. A judge brings justice and order and formality within the framework of running a city. And if someone just goes crazy and does whatever he wants, he's brought before the Bezdin. So Rashi says that it's on this pasuk, Leman Tichya V'yarashta es ha'oretz, that the Maral says on this Rashi that was how communities were able to be formulated and established with the power of success and end up with a successful, orderly community because of this tzivui here, and establishing that it was like Maisa Avosim and Labanim. That means a community, says the Maral, 800 years after the Torah was given, and they had different cities that they established throughout the Eretz Yisrael, but they had a proper justice system with honest judges. That ignited the ability of a city 1,200 years later, 1,500 years later, to have in its system, in its DNA, because of what was planted and done with dayanim in molding and shaping proper format and regulation. Now, there is a famous question that we know what happened with Sodom. And it was completely destroyed. The men, the women, the children, everyone. And we know in Tanakh that there was a story of Pelegish Begiva, that in Giva, Shevet Binyamin, there was a man who was sleeping in the street and had a Pelegish. And somebody came by and said, like, what are you doing in the middle of the street, sleeping on a bench? And took him home. But the people in Giva were not nice people, just like in Sodom. And they knocked on his door, and they wanted the man to be brought out for immorality, just like they wanted in Sodom. That the two men that came in, they wanted them to, and Lot went like a Meshuggah and offered his own daughters. Take my daughters and do what you want, but don't touch these men. So Sodom was completely destroyed. But Pelegish Begiva, they asked the whole Klal Yisrael they violated this Pelegish, because at the end they didn't want to give out the man. So they took the Pelegish, and the whole night they violated her. In the morning she was on the doorstep, and she died right there from the abuse. So it says that Shevet Binyamin, many died. The whole Klal Yisrael went to war and killed out a lot, but they didn't kill out the whole Binyamin. So the story is so similar to Sodom that the Meforshim asked that if Sodom was destroyed completely, why not the whole Shevet Binyamin from such a story? So they answer and say, because Sodom codified and legalized what they were doing, all of their disgusting, terrible behavior of no chesed and making sure people would be punished and killed, and if they extended to somebody who needed help and needed chesed. Binyamin never codified or agreed with such behavior. And the Mepharshim are saying that's why they continued as a Shevet. So when Rashi says that this Indian of Tzedek Tirdov, and he says, Hahoylech Achar Bezdin Kedai Hu Minui Dayonim Kesherim, that it's Kedai. Now Kedai means, it's nice. It's a nice thing to do. So the Maral says it doesn't mean Kedai like it's just nice to do. It's proper to do because every city established after this would benefit from this tremendous tzivui of establishing dayonim and whatever, that they would have the power to draw down from the source of original appointments for dayonim and make a difference in their city, to have the backbone and the cement to formulate that which is needed to have a city flourish properly. Now, there's a parsha in our Sedra about a melech, that if Klal Yisrael suddenly says, we would like to have other countries have kings, we would like a king. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no problem. You can appoint, and he gave him rules and regulations. He shouldn't have too many wives. He shouldn't this. He shouldn't that. He shouldn't have too many horses. Mitzrayim was the capital of the world in good horses, quality horses, because Leman Harbo Sus, because if he has too many horses, he's going to end up going back to Mitzrayim for better and better. And there's a whole list of requirements for this Melech Yisrael. But one of them is that he had to have 2 Sifrei Torah. You know that every Yid has a chiyuv of writing a Sefer Torah. And what we do, not everyone can afford $60,000 or $70,000 to write a Sefer Torah. So we buy a parsha, we buy a letter. And that's called shutfis, that you're in the development and the writing of this new Sefer Torah. But the Melech Yisrael, the Pasuk says, had a responsibility of writing 2 Sifrei Torah. One he carried with him wherever he went. It was there right next to him. And the other one was inside his privacy, private chambers for him inside. So Mefarshim, the Rambam talks about it, and others. Why did he have to have 2 Sifrei Torah? I mean, if someone has a Shas in their house, they don't need 2 Shas to be able to learn Shas. They have 1 Shas. What did he need 2 Sifrei Torah? So they answer and say that usually a person has to be Tocho Kibaro, inwardly as he professes to be outwardly, and vice versa. That you have to be what you are. You have to, what you see is what you get. That there's not a Dr. Heckle and Mr. Dr. Heckle and Mr. not Jide, okay, whatever it is called, the 2 personalities, that he acted one way and the other way was a completely different person. And that was every Yid, has to be inwardly as outwardly. But a Melech Yisrael had to have a posture of royalty and majesty under the umbrella of leadership in his kingdom. So when he went out, he couldn't look aside for this. Don't forget, if someone defied the Melech Yisrael, the halacha was that he was chayav misa, that he was publicly defined what the king had said to do, yes or no, and there was a death penalty for it. So he had to exude a feeling and a leadership quality of royalty. But when he got home, and that was why he had one Sefer Torah, because that was one part of his personality, his role as king. But when he was home, he had to be the simplest and the most humble, like every Yid, despite who he is, a billionaire, a president, whatever he is, he has a requirement as a human being to have that backbone of humility and the characteristics of so much as a human being and as a person. And it was a big test, because most people who end up and are propelled into a position of power or wealth, quite often they end up in a posture and in a frame of mind of being better and being above. Because it's a test. It's a tremendous test of character. So the Melech Yisrael had to have two Sifrei Torah, one for his position outside in facing Klal Yisrael and making public decisions with a total backbone of what was right and wrong and what should be and shouldn't be, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu would be happy with. But the other one, he had to be like each and every Yid in his home, not jumping the gun together with his ego. So I hope that the Eivishas will help him. We're in Elul, and that is the most opportune time to be able to bring out the best in ourselves.